as I started working on this book several years ago, and people kept telling me kind of skeptically, nobody's going to be surprised that big law firms do nasty things on behalf of their clients. Of course, that's what they're going to do. And of course, they're going to win at all costs. That's almost their duty to clients. And I kind of had that in the back of my mind as I started researching the history of Jones Day. And one of the examples I came across, I thought was a really strong kind of rebuttal to that point. And basically what happened is that in 1944 in Cleveland, a big gas company had built a set of tanks to hold liquid natural gas. And two of those tanks exploded. It basically leveled an entire neighborhood in Cleveland. A lot of people died, many more were injured. There was a ton of property that was destroyed. And so the gas company, the day of the explosion, it was a Friday, went to their lawyers at Jones Day and said, look, this just happened. You need to provide us very quickly with some legal advice on how to handle this, because we're obviously going to be flooded with litigation. And Jones Day spent the weekend basically researching the case law and kind of coming up with some options to propose to the gas company. And the obvious option was what companies, I think, normally would do in a situation like this. Certainly today they would normally do. And that's basically fight tooth and nail to avoid paying damages to any of the people whose property was harmed or who were injured themselves. You can do that by kind of protracted legal strategies to kind of kick the can down the road. You can place the blame on other people, like the steel company that had helped build these gas tanks, things like that. You can kind of discount the amount of damages that people suffered, things like that. Jones Day, though, so basically said that that's one option. Here's another option, which is what we recommend. If you want to remain in Cleveland as a good corporate citizen, you should just admit that you're responsible for this huge tragedy that just occurred, and you should accept responsibility and offer to pay people. And so the explosion took place on a Friday. That Monday, the gas company ran an ad in the local newspaper that said, come to our offices, present evidence that you were harmed or your property was harmed, and we will pay you on the spot. And so Jones Day set up on the ground floor of the gas company's headquarters desks and basically manned those desks, and on the spot cut something like, in today's dollars, I think it's more than $100 million in checks to people right then and there. And this is held up, and over the decade, the gas company remains in Cleveland. It is its efforts to kind of make people whole are widely regarded as having been the right thing to do. Its reputation was intact. And it just stands in complete contrast to the way that Jones Day these days will go to the ends of the earth, basically, to defend clients that are accused of doing things that have had similar negative consequences, whether it's helping opioid companies or gun manufacturers or cigarette companies, and on and on. Jones Day is renowned these days for being super aggressive in the courtroom, doing everything it can to undercut witnesses, undercut plaintiffs. And again, that's within their rights as a law firm to do it. But the notion that that is simply the only way to practice law and only way to serve a client well is really belied by Jones Day's own history. And so that example really stood out to me as a powerful example of the way things could be if lawyers and law firms and their clients were incentivized to act in a certain way.
And we should also say, and this is, I think, really important to articulate, the Sixth Amendment says that defendants are guaranteed the right of counsel in criminal cases. And you write about this. There has been an attempt, and we see this all the time in the justifications, that even defendants are should have a right to representation. But this is not. That is in a criminal case, not there. And it's not just that they don't.
ExxonMobil.
It's not that they don't have a right. It's that there is no. They have sort of melded this constitutional provision that is very important to a just and free society. And they've melded it into a justification of, like, we can represent the worst people doing the worst things, that as long as it's, they're a defendant, doesn't matter whether it's a criminal or a civil proceeding. And it allows them, it's basically for them, a get out of jail free card for their conscience.
Yeah, and this has been one of the main points that Jones Day and other big law firms have used to attack my book, which is that they're simply upholding the proud American tradition of everyone gets a lawyer no matter what. And that's, of course, not the tradition. As you said, it's the Sixth Amendment says people accused of crimes are entitled to counsel, which, by the way, they often don't get very good counsel because so many lawyers are recruited into these giant corporate law firms with the huge salaries. And it means that there are many fewer really skilled defense lawyers available to poor people and people of color than there otherwise would be. And to me, it's even if you stipulate that anyone, including any corporation that's accused of any wrongdoing in any setting, civil or criminal, is entitled to legal counsel, that still doesn't cover a huge amount of what big corporate law firms today are doing, which is helping clients and super wealthy individuals do things like avoid taxes, avoid government scrutiny, weaken federal regulations, state regulations, and in some cases, and I go through this in the book, and intimidating local officials in random towns all over the country into not properly regulating tobacco, things like that. And these are services to which no one, under even the most expansive interpretation of the Sixth Amendment or other provisions of the Constitution, no one's entitled to these. And it's not to say you shouldn't be allowed to get them, but the notion that lawyers and law firms should be immune from scrutiny and criticism for helping companies avoid taxes or move money around secretly, and that's just nonsense.
Well, it's the priest-like quality that Sam kind of alluded to earlier, and the almost religious way that one views their profession, just copy and paste it onto a corporate money-making model that, I mean, doesn't necessarily jive with their high opinion of themselves, frankly.
Yeah, it's become a very convenient and kind of all-purpose smokescreen that big law firms use to justify all sorts of work that they really, and I think, don't have a particularly strong moral or ethical justification for doing, but that is very, very lucrative and allows them to continue expanding, continue hiring more lawyers, and continue recruiting additional clients. And I think the one caveat to this is that a lot of these big law firms make the point, which is true, that they have really robust pro bono practices, that the fact that they're making so much money representing big bad corporate clients allows them to do things that truly are good for the world. And Jones Day is a good example of this. They have poured a tremendous amount of money into doing some really, I think, noble work on the US-Mexico border, helping undocumented migrants who are in desperate need of legal representation. But so the combination of everyone deserves a lawyer and look at the good things we're doing with our huge profits have really, the legal industry has been very adept at using those two forces to insulate themselves from any substantive criticism and to attack anyone who questions the work that they're doing.
So it's not, and to be clear, it's not just, although in my mind that is almost sufficient. Like the idea that they're representing some of the most reprehensible corporations and actions that one can imagine. It's also the nature of their tactics that they're using. That is, again, this is, this gets into just sort of like their size and the amount of money that they're making.